Good evening, fourth year students. This is a video lecture for the poem that we have already studied and analyzed, Crossing the Bar by Alfred Lord Tennyson. So before we start with the poem, we should have a very brief idea about the poet, something about the poet's life, because we see that part of what the poet has experienced in his life has influenced his poetry, especially his late poetry. And also, we should pay attention that the poem is a reflection. The theme, you can say the general theme of the poem, is a reflection of the Victorian period. Because you remember when we described the features of the Victorian period, we said that in the poems that we are going to study, we are going to notice how these features are represented in them. Okay, so Alfred Lord Tennyson. Here, what do we need to know about him? He was born on the 6th of August 1809. He is often regarded as the chief representative of the Victorian age in poetry. So whenever you study, whenever you want to have an idea about Victorian poetry, you cannot skip studying Alfred Tennyson. He's, you can say, he's the pioneer. He's the best representative of this period, the poetry of this period. Okay, what tiny detail we can say that we need to know about his life? The death of his close friend caused him a tremendous grief, which permeated much of his later poetry. You see, so he has certain experience in his life, especially concerning death, because you see our poem is about death. So the extreme sadness that he felt for the death of his friend, this experience was reflected on his idea, or let's say on his concept of death and its relation to faith. You see, and that's why this is important for us as we are studying the poem. The theme of death and its relation to faith and religion is one of the main subjects of his late poetry. And we are talking about his late poetry, which means what? It means that we are talking about the poetry that the poet wrote in the last years of his life. يعني في الوقت اللي كان هو يقترب، خلينا نقول يمكن من الموت. Okay, this poem particularly, this poem, Crossing the Bar, Alfred Lord Tennyson said that this poem should be placed on the end of any poetry collection that is published for him. Okay, so as if the poet is considering this poem as an elegy. تعرفون كلمة elegy شنو تعني؟ المرثية، يعني شخص من يموت الناس يكتبون عنه رثاء. الرثاء هو عبارة عن مديح لشخص المتوفى. Okay, so the poem could be considered as what? As an elegy for the poet by himself. يعني هو كأنما هو كتب عن نفسه هاي المرثية. You see? So it expresses one of the main conflicts of his age, the Victorian age. Which conflict you are talking about? You are talking about the conflict between faith and doubt. One of the things that were causing this conflict is the discussion that was in society among people, for example, people who still maintain their faith and the people who have their doubts about religion. Part of this discussion was, for example, about death, the nature of death, what comes after death, how death makes life meaningless, according to some people who, of course, we are talking about the people who have their own doubts about religion. Okay, so this is in brief what we need to know about Tennyson's life. Of course, there are many details, but we are not going to go through them. We just need very brief idea about his life. Now, when it comes to the title, you see, Crossing the Bar. We said, you remember in our lectures, We said that this title consists of two parts. The first one, the word crossing. What does it mean? It means to move. This is the meaning that I think all of you know it. It means the movement from one side to another. يعني شنو؟ يعني مو مجرد انتقال من مكان إلى لا، من جهة إلى أخرى, from one side to another. Okay, another interesting meaning. So this is one of the meanings, but we still have another one which is really interesting. Another interesting meaning that could possibly relate to it, which is what? In Christianity, performing a prayer. شايفين هاي الحركة اللي يسووها المسيحيين في الصلاة. They draw a certain sign, which is the sign of the cross, الصليب. They draw a cross, and of course they say certain things as they are performing this gesture. This is performing of what? Of a prayer in Christianity. And usually prayers are performed for getting blessings from God, you see? So these are what? Two different meanings for the same word, crossing. What about the other word, the bar? Multiple meanings actually, but the one that we are concerned with, look at this one here. The other part of the title, the bar, also bears several meanings. The meaning which is closest to this context is the sand bar, which sets a boundary between land and the sea or the ocean. The sand bar هذا الحاجز الرملي قلنا اللي يفصل ما بين الماء واليابسة. You see? Sand bar. كلمة البار هي نفسها كلمة بار حتى بمعانيها الأخرى. You see all the different meanings that you can check for this word in the dictionary. You will notice that all of them have this idea of what? There is a boundary between something and something else. فكرة وجود حاجز. تمام? Boundary. But here the meaning that is closest to our context, to our poem, is what? The sand bar, which separates land from the sea. Okay? So, يعني إذا نختصر المعنى المقصود بالعنوان, crossing this sandbar means that the sailor is leaving the harbor to go through a sea journey. Okay, so this sandbar, what is the importance, or let's say what's the significance of this bar in this poem? Or why do you think that the poet specifically mentions the bar? Why? Because this boundary of sand which separates the land from the sea, after crossing it, you see, the person or the sailor starts what? Starts his journey. So crossing this this boundary, this barrier of sand, means that you are moving from one side to another, meaning that you are starting the journey. You see, this is the significance of the bar. هاي صورة توضيحية يعني تقريبا هذا يعتبر هذا حاجز الرملي يسمونه. You see the sand bar. So Tennyson uses, لا يوضح لكم الفكرة بشكل أفضل. Tennyson uses the metaphor of a sand bar to describe the barrier between life and death. So you already know that this bar stands as what? As a metaphor for the, let's say, the boundary which separates life and death. And of course, in this metaphor here, in this comparison, the land represents life and the sea represents death. Okay? A sandbar is a ridge of sand built by currents along a shore. In order to reach the shore, the waves must crash against the sandbar, creating a sound that Tennyson describes as the moaning of the bar. So the sound, if you have ever gone to the sea and you see the waves coming to the shore, and as they hit the shore, they produce a certain sound. So this sound, according to the metaphor that the poet uses here, he describes it as if it is a sound of moaning. Moaning قلنا شنو معناها الأنين مو تمام? The sound that is produced when a person feels pain. Okay? So if we go through the poem again, Look here. Sunset and evening star and one clear call for me. The very first word here, طبعا, of course, you know, on this side we have the poem. On this side we have some notes about the stanza. You should follow the colors. Okay, follow the colors. يعني تشوفون اللون هنا أخضر، النوت اللي من هاي الجهة اللي باللون الأخضر تخص هذا الجزء. Okay, just follow the colors so that you understand each note belongs to which part. So sunset, you see, what time of the day is it? So from the very first word we understand that the poet is giving us the time setting. يعني خلينا نحدد شنو، خلينا نحدد الsetting, time and place. The place we already know it. It is the seashore. Okay, but what time is it? It is sunset, and the time here is really significant. Why? Because you see here, it begins with the end of the day. The end of the day, which also is a metaphor for what? The end of life. Okay, the end of the day. يعني اختيار الوقت هنا مو عبثي، اختيار الوقت دقيق. The sunset, because it is the beginning of the end of the day. يعني هو the day hasn't ended yet, but it is the beginning of the end. Okay, so which signifies the end of life and the beginning of death. Okay, so he said sunset and evening star, and we said evening star is it is Venus, the first thing that appears in the sky when it is sunset. The first star نقدر نسميه، هو طبعا أكيد كوكب ولكن إحنا يظهر لنا كنجم. So as if the appearance of this star also is what? A sign. كأنما هاي علامة. It is a sign for the poet that the time has come. And what? And one clear call for me. You remember we said, what kind of call? Where does it come from, this call? So as if the poet is hearing something. Maybe he hears something, but he interprets or he understands this call as what? As the call of death. لاحظوا هنا. The speaker hears a call which makes him surprised, shocked. شلون عرفنا هو surprised and shocked? You see هنا علامة التعجب. Exclamation mark here. Why the poet puts an exclamation mark on the end of this line? After he hears the call, he feels somehow shocked or surprised. Maybe why? Maybe he's not ready. Or even though he knows that there is a call for him, but he didn't expect it that it could come at this time. See, in both cases, he is what? Surprised. Okay, this is a metaphor for the call of death. تلاحظون هو الموت عادة يكون شنو؟ مفاجئ. No matter how you are prepared, no matter how much you are aware that as a human being you are going to die one day, but still, when it comes, it is really surprising. And may there be no moaning of the bar when I put out to sea. Okay, I hope that the sandbar will not be disturbed when I go out to sea. So this reflects what? That the poet really hopes or wishes that his journey or this journey is going to be let's say an easy one. There is no suffering, there is no pain in this journey. Okay, but such a tide as moving seems asleep, too full for sound and foam. Okay, so when he is carried by the waves, he hopes that it will carry him slowly. He hopes that his journey to the sea, and here the journey to the sea is actually a journey to the unknown. Why to the unknown? Because who knows what lies ahead after death? Of course, we all know death is the final destination, but who knows what is there in death? It is something unknown. Till now, it is something unknown to all people. Okay, but our speaker here hopes that although it is a journey to something, to some unknown place, he hopes that the journey is going to be safe one, a slow one. Okay, Just like a sailor, when he goes to the sea, he hopes that the tides, the waves, are calm. They are going to take him softly, safely to his destination. There are, for example, no storms, no dangers in sea. تعرفون انتوا البحر عادة ما تكون بيه خلينا نقول عواصف، أحيانا الأمواج تكون عالية فممكن يشكل خطر. But here our speaker, whether he is talking about being a sailor or whether he's talking about the journey of death, in both cases he hopes that the journey is safe, not a dangerous one. Okay? When that which drew from out the boundless deep turns again home. So this describes what? The cyclical motion of the waves, the motion of waves. If you have ever noticed, the waves come from the deep sea, from the depth of the sea. They come from there and then they move till they reach to the shore and then they crush, but their movement is circular. You see, they move from there and then when they crush to the seashore and then they go back. This is a cyclical motion, which could be actually a hint to what? The description of this cyclical motion of waves is reminiscent, يعني يذكرنا, of the cycle of life and death. You see, هاي دورة الحياة والموت. Okay? So you see, the poet is giving us many hints to the idea of life and death. Twilight and evening bell. لاحظوا هاي تشابه بين هاي الفقرة أو العفو هاي هذا المقطع والمقطع الأول. Twilight. Now what time has come? In the beginning it was sunset. Gradually what happens? Time passes. Time passes. يعني الشمس كانت تغرب بس هسه شنو؟ بعد اختفت. The sun has what? Disappeared. So time is passing, and you see the passage of time also is another idea which is related to death. Why? Because the passage of time makes you get what? Older, and as you get older you are closer to death. تلاحظون إذن هاي الفكرة أيضا إلها علاقة بالموت. Twilight. And we can even interpret that this gradual movement of time signifies the journey of life till man reaches to the point of death. Okay? So twilight, time passes and now twilight comes. The ringing of the bell is another sign of the approach of death. Evening bell. I told you that in the Victorian period there was this tradition of ringing bells to announce the coming of night. Okay? But our speaker understands also, again, he understands this sound as what? As if it is a sign that death has come already. And after that, the dark. Finally, after twilight, what happens? Complete darkness. So it is night. Now, the time has become what? Night. And notice once again he uses exclamation mark. Okay? علامة التعجب يستخدمها للمرة الثانية هنا, which also means that the speaker is truly surprised and shocked by the coming of death. But dark itself here, the word dark itself means death here. يعني خلص وصل إلى النقطة شنو؟ الموت. Okay, after that, darkness befalls, which means the moment of death has come. Okay, and of course, when anyone is traveling and he leaves his country, or a person when he dies and he leaves people behind, what happens to those people? What kind of feeling they have? Sadness, of course. And may there be no sadness of farewell when I embark. So the speaker hopes that the people who will be parted with him, will not feel sad for his departure. So he hopes that this journey, not only that it should be safe, but also the people I'm going to leave behind, my family, my friends, the people I love, they are not going to feel sad for my departure. They will not feel sad because I left, because I died. See, when I embark and صار عندي سولفت لكم بالمحاضرة أيضا قلت لكم على the use of what when how many times I think 3 or 4 times he uses the word when. So when do we use this word? If you have an appointment and you are very sure that this appointment will happen or will take place at a certain time, okay, it's something inevitable, something that you are sure is coming, so you use when, that whenever the time comes I'm ready. It shows that you are what, preparing yourself, you are ready to go through this journey when the time comes. Okay, أكثر من مرة إذا تلاحظون يستخدم كلمة when, because the journey of death is something what, inevitable, it is something certain. For though from out our bourne of time and place the flood may bear me far. So the journey is taking him to a very far away destination, which goes out the boundaries of time and place, which means I think this is a very clear hint to what, to death, because in death there is no time and there is no place. Okay, when the person dies, he goes to the afterlife and then he does not experience time and place just like the people who are still alive. Okay, good, the journey is far away, the tides will take him out of the boundaries of time and place, which is what, another hint to death. Okay, I hope to see my pilot face to face when I have crossed the bar. So at the end of this journey, our speaker hopes that he's going to meet the pilot. And here the word pilot is significant. Why? Because first of all, you see it is written in capital letter, which means that he is referring to specific personality. And in this case, it is Jesus Christ. Okay, Jesus Christ in the Bible is called pilot, one of his names. Why? Because what does a pilot do normally? He leads. The pilot is a leader. And Jesus Christ in Christianity is believed to be the leader of humanity. He is the leader of humanity to salvation. Okay? So after death, this is in the Christian faith. After death, a believer is going to meet whom? He's going to meet his Lord, Jesus Christ. Okay? So this makes death, or the idea of death, what? Acceptable. Okay? This is what makes the idea of death acceptable. Okay? So what makes the idea of death acceptable is the faith that the speaker has in meeting his pilot in the other side after death. So he wishes to be blessed by him. How do we interpret it like this? Because we have, look here, when I have crossed, طبعا هنا here crossed, when I have crossed the bar, and I told you crossed here is a past, an old form of the past tense for crossed. Okay, so after being carried away to the other side, to the afterlife, after death, he's going to meet God, his Lord, and this meeting, the poet hopes, is going to give him blessings. So in this case, death becomes an acceptable idea. Instead of fearing death, okay, instead of feeling afraid, instead of feeling panic or surprised or shocked because of the idea of death, the speaker feels very calm, very comfortable. He accepts, he reconciles with the idea of death. Okay, so this makes death meaningful in the end. What comes after life is something really meaningful, as long as it is with God. Okay. Okay. ملاحظة أخيرة مهمة هنا. This poem is considered an example of allegory. Okay, تذكرون سولفت لكم شوي على allegory. allegory بالعربي تعني حكاية رمزية. What does it mean? Simply, allegory is defined as any work of literature that, upon interpretation, reveals a deeper meaning. يعني we have two meanings. Surface, the one which appears on the surface, okay? And we have another deeper meaning. When we read the poem in the beginning, from the beginning till the end, there is a surface meaning which we understand, which is what? A sea journey, sailor who's preparing himself to go through a sea journey. But the deeper meaning, you see, when we interpreted the poem, when we analyzed the poem, what did we understand? We understood that on the deeper level, the poem is speaking about the journey from life to death. Okay, تلاحظون هاي الحالة يسموها بالأدب allegory. Okay, and crossing the bar is one of the best examples of allegory. So the speaker compares sailing out into an unknown sea with the journey into the afterlife. Okay, this is, I think, clear. On the surface level, he describes the journey to the sea, while on the deeper level, he hints to the journey from life to death. وبقت عندنا أيضا هذا المصطلح أيضا أتذكر حكيت لكم إياه اللي هو pun. هنا طبعا S هنا لأن هي جمع puns، يعني pun مفرد فجامعيها على puns. pun إذا تذكرون كلمة cross, when we said that cross has two different meanings, okay? It is the same word, but still it has two different meanings. It is pronounced in the same way, and in both cases it has two different meanings. The first one in our poem was moving from one side to another. The other meaning was what? Prayer, or blessings of the prayer. So this case we call it pun. تمام? And both are correct. Actually, both meanings are correct in this context. Both of them can be correctly used. فإذا المصطلح هو شنو؟ pun. Okay? أمسح الأس حتى يكون واضح. pun. So عندنا هنا مصطلحين, allegory and pun. And I think they are very clear for you. Here we have figures of speech in this poem. Sunset and evening star, they are visionary images. You remember the figures of speech we used to have in poems the previous year. The word call, because we are referring to something that could be heard, call. So this is auditory image. Seems asleep. طبعا تلاحظون ان انا كاتبت لكم بيا سطر تلقونها line 5, line 2, line 1, okay, line 7. Seems asleep. Seems. It is not asleep, but it could be, or seems. So this is what? Simile. And at the same time, personification, when he described the tide as if it is what? Asleep. Who usually is asleep? Human beings. So this is personification. Boundless deep is metaphor. Boundless deep, here he means the ocean. So this is metaphor. Evening bell, again, is auditory image. The dark, we said, is a metaphor for death. Okay. Pilot, biblical allusion. Why? Because we said Pilate is one of the names of Jesus Christ in the Bible. So here this is an allusion to Jesus Christ. So this is biblical allusion. And finally we have the word crossed in the end, which means both meanings, crossing as moving and crossing as prayer, which is what? Pun. Okay. So I think this is a very clear and beautiful poem, which really reflects the conflict of faith and doubt. And actually the poem could be an example of an attempt by a poet to make people understand and accept the idea of death. يعني هاي القصيدة كتبت بهدف، هي صح كان يتكلم عن نفسه إلى حد ما، ولكن الفكرة شنو؟ That anyone who reads this poem, especially the people of the Victorian period, they could have an idea of how to accept the idea of faith, how to reconcile with the idea of death. So thank you very much for listening. And if you have, of course, any questions, you can ask in our group in Telegram. Thank you.